And when we call Dr. Ray, as I was saying, this is no longer the description which is officially appropriate. Now Dr. Ray is saying that this description of a quote-unquote perforating wound is not correct. Why did he say this? Well, perhaps without coincidence, Dr. Ray's admission that this death certificate is wrong, and in fact, as you've seen in the program earlier, we actually are showing you an actual copy of the death certificate, and we've prominently displayed the word perforating, that is, that this is a perforating shotgun wound to the head. The perforating is now no longer considered correct by the chief pathologist himself. And in fact, this admission came only one day after the video that we aired on this program 2 weeks ago. This was video that was aired to the public for the first time on this program, and the video includes the image that we have blown up for you here. And so take a close look. As you've seen in the program earlier, this is an image of Kurt Cobain's head and his hair and the surrounding floor. And as you can see, not a drop of blood evident anywhere. And this, of course, was at the scene of the discovery of the body of Mr. Cobain on April 8th. And so this rather compelling evidence apparently compelled the King County Medical Examiner to change the description of the wound suffered by Kurt Cobain. And now, after all, as you can see, the top of the head and the hair of Mr. Cobain are unstained by blood, not a drop of blood anywhere. And this video rather conclusively and persuasively demonstrates that he did not suffer a, quote, contact perforating shotgun wound to the head, to the mouth. Elsewise, his brains would be scattered out several feet behind him, which they are obviously not. In fact, not a drop of blood can be seen anywhere, as no blood at all was visible in other, less dramatic photographic evidence from the scene. For instance, the April 9th photo in the Seattle Times on the cover in color. So Kurt Cobain suffered this wound from this extremely powerful weapon, and there was no blood at all, or perhaps very little blood. Gee, that's funny. It doesn't seem possible that Mr. Cobain or anyone could suffer such an injury without a massive wound. But as of the airing of this image, this is what they have changed their explanation to. That his wound was an internal wound only. Rather than a quote-unquote perforating wound, it's now being described as a quote-unquote penetrating wound, wherein, and I must emphasize that I am not kidding, the King County Medical Examiner now says that all of the shots stayed inside Mr. Cobain's skull, and that there was no exit wound from the blast inflicted by a 20-gauge shotgun, an extremely powerful weapon. Seattle Police Department homicide detectives now concur with this finding of no exit wound. Never mind that a leading forensic pathologist, perhaps the leading forensic pathologist in the nation, told me directly that this was not possible, or that it was quote-unquote virtually impossible. And also a coroner with 30 years experience in Los Angeles, where they see 1,500 suicides per year, according to this coroner, also says that this is not in any way possible to suffer a contact wound to the mouth with a 20-gauge shotgun and not spill your brains out behind you. That is, not suffer a perforating wound, as it was originally claimed that this was. So it was not, the penetrating wound is simply not possible, though this is now what is, of course, being asserted. And so if Kurt Cobain died of a magic bullet, just what did Detective Antonio Martinez Terry die of? There's a substantial amount of evidence that there was some magic in this bullet, too. Perhaps not so completely impossible as Cobain's wound scenario, but still suggesting that just because a technician wears a white scientific lab coat does not mean that his work should not be held above science. That is, just because a technician wears a white lab coat, his work is not above scientific review. That this work should be open to scientific review by the public, by journalists, and everyone else. Because neither Kurt Cobain nor Detective Antonio Terry should be allowed to die of magic bullet wounds. And by the way, Detective Terry, as was reported vaguely on the front page of the Seattle Post-Intelligencer recently, was working on some kind of a narcotics case having to do with Kurt Cobain. According to one police source, Detective Terry was merely working on helping to bust Cobain's alleged drug dealer friend, who has never been identified nor authenticated, with the help of the mysterious, unlikely narc Ms. Courtney Love, wife of Kurt Cobain. Or it is also possible that he was assisting Ms. Love in tracking down Kurt Cobain. It's not clear. In fact, according to one vague report that has been published, in fact, Mr. Cobain may have had a contact with police on April 2nd, that is, Seattle police, and this may have very well been Detective Antonio Terry. And in fact, it raises the question because, for instance, in the Seattle Times accounting of the last days of Kurt Cobain, his trail drops off after April 2nd or during April 2nd, the morning, according to the Times. It raises the question as to whether maybe Detective Terry was the last person, the last reliable witness that is known now to have seen Kurt Cobain alive. And in fact, the substantial evidence as to a connection between Kurt Cobain and Detective Terry is found in this missing persons report. Have a look here. This area, the blacked out area, is in fact where Detective Terry's name is in the missing persons report on Kurt Cobain. Now, we could barely make out the fact that it does say, in fact, Detective Terry, SPD Narcotics has further info. And there's a date of last contact, which is April 2nd, 1994, which coincides with the published report that Kurt Cobain had contact with Seattle police on that date, which leads us to suspect the possibility that it was Detective Terry who had contact with Kurt Cobain on that date, although, of course, that cannot be substantiated at this point. And so Detective Terry's name appears on the famous and not altogether unmysterious missing persons report filed by either Mrs. Wendy O'Connor, Kurt Cobain's mother, or someone pretending to be Mrs. O'Connor on April 4th. This reporter called Detective Terry less than 2 weeks before his death to discuss this and had a mighty strange interview for about 15 minutes with Detective Terry. Overtly, Detective Terry would not admit to me any knowledge of the case directly in terms of acknowledgments that one could quote. What he gave me was a barely half-hearted denial as to knowing why his name was on the report, which undeniably it is, while at the same time dropping hints that he knew much more than he was saying. Detective Terry seemed like a man in this interview I had with him who felt that he was somehow playing a pat hand. Or at least this is one appropriate interpretation of the mixed signals that Detective Terry was sending me in my interview with him. Detective Terry knew far more than he was letting on to. In this series of programs, we have labored to emphasize that we are not trying to engage in fast and loose rumor mongering and conspiracy theorizing. For just one moment, we want to step over that line ever so slightly. And why? Well, because of the ghastly seriousness of it all. A beloved entertainer and Seattle's most famous citizen has been murdered under very mysterious circumstances. So mysterious, in fact, that officially it's not even acknowledged to be a murder, despite rather persuasive evidence. And amid widespread apparent official misconduct in the Cobain case, now a very respected and evidently very intelligent police detective is also now the victim of a shooting and a mysterious death. The connection between the two men is genuine in life. That is, the connection between the two men in life is quite genuine and undeniable, though still not at all quite clear. Was there any connection between their deaths, we ask? Obviously, we cannot answer that question now, and it is possible that we will never be able to answer that question, but we will assert strongly here that it is as in all scientific inquiry, discovery must first begin with a question, even if it is an unsettling question, and that this is a question worthy of inquiry, even if at this point the question of a connection between the deaths of Kurt Cobain and Antonio Terry does not appear strongly likely. But the severity of the crimes against these men and the mystery surrounding their deaths means that clearly it is a question worthy of inquiry, unceremonious as putting forth this question may be. And so there you have it. There is a connection between the two men in life, in death. It's an open question. And as I have asserted, it is at least a question worth posing. And were there any investigatory ability evident at the Seattle Police Department, we would even say that it is a question worthy of investigation. But of course, by this point, we have little confidence in the investigatory capabilities of the Seattle Police Department.